Thank you for watching Murder, Monsters, and Mysteries. Today we take a look at the lost civilization of Tartaria. What's that you say? You've never heard of Tartaria? Strange, right? Well, why didn't you hear about it? Let's start at the beginning. What is this large book? Or these other large books? Why is it that we don't hear about the thousands upon thousands of massive books that have been discovered throughout history? Are we to believe that these pieces of literature are what our ancestors used to read and collect for their bookshelves at home? If so, why the heck would we have such large books and novels? Why is this door so large? Who would need one so big? And this one? And this other one over here? This one? And especially this one? Why do we need doors this large? Why did our ancestors? Who built these? If you were to believe some people's theories, then you might consider that there's a civilization that's been erased by our leaders. A civilization that was technologically more advanced than any other in our past. Removed from the history books. Crazy, right? Except for, we have it on map, after map, after map, after map, throughout history. Thousands of maps, all listing Tartaria. Some people would tell you, oh, Tartaria, that's just how we used to describe a part of Asia. Okay, then what would explain the historical references to the country and its leader? We've got references here, here, over here, and again more sources in Asia, more sources, even more sources, and it just goes on and on and on. Source after source of historical record of the leader and the population of Tartaria. What does this all mean? Let's go into it in further details. And now for a brief commercial break.
From the evil one, deliver me.
From the evil one, deliver me.
At the hour of my death,
At the hour of my death,
call me and bid me to come to thee.
call me and bid me to come to thee.
Give me the compass. If you don't, we'll take her eyes. We'll take your family's eyes. We'll make this whole town blind.
From the evil one, deliver me.
From the evil one, deliver me.
At the hour of my death,
At the hour of my death,
Probably should have come here first.
come to thee.
call me and bid me.
Have a look here. This is 1893 Chicago. Looks appropriate, right? Man-made buildings, streetcars. Here's another shot. 1893 Chicago. Beautiful, right? A metropolis. And yet, this is not a picture of 1893 Chicago. Let's have a look at the actual photos of the Chicago World's Fair of 1893, and you'll be shocked to see that this is what Chicago looked like in 1893. See the obelisk on the left? The towers to the building? The structures in the background? Look at the size of those statues on the top of the building. Look at the size of those statues compared to the little dots of people standing in front of the building. What do you think those are? 10 feet tall per statue? Here's another shot of the World's Fair. Machinery Hall. This building, if it were around today, would be the second largest building in the world. Number 2. But look at how elaborate it is. Again, look at the towers, much like obelisks. Look at the glass. Look at the shapes. How much work would it take to create this structure? What kind of manpower? How many days? And keep in mind, if this were around today, like I said, it would be the second largest building in the world. This is the largest building in the world today. The Boeing factory. Look how simple it is. This is the largest building we can make today, that we can fund, that we can put together the resources for. And it's like a giant Lego block. No elaborate design, no towers, nothing extra, just basic. And yet, this building has broken all the records. What do you think would be harder to build? That one? Or this one? So even though it might be slightly smaller, it's a far, far greater building. Here's another building, the Agriculture Center. During the 1893 Chicago World's Expo, World's Fair, there were 14 buildings like this. They were called the 14 Great Buildings. 14 buildings, all almost the largest building in the world, if they were around today. This is the Fisheries Building. The Fisheries Building at the 1893 Chicago World Fair. Look at it. It's beautiful. Elaborate. Magnificent. Look at this downtown Chicago. This statue, we're told, was supposed to be dedicated to Columbus, but it has nothing to do with Columbus. This ship sat in a fountain at that Chicago World Fair. It's beautiful, elaborate, like something you'd find in ancient Greece or Rome. Here's another shot. Downtown waterways, filled with boats going by, pedestrians. Here's another shot. Are we to believe that this is the construction that the people of the 1800s came up with? That massive statue in the middle there? Because many believe that what you're seeing right now is an image of buildings that were made by ancient Tartarians. Many believe that these ancient Tartarians were wiped out by some natural disaster, and humanity silently replaced them and wrote them out of the history books, replaced them with ourselves, and kept it secret. Whoever thinks that must be insane, you might suggest. But Chicago was founded in the year 1833. However, when we look back at maps as early as 1605, and some even older than that, we find a city labeled in the Chicago area as Shago. So these proponents of the Tartaria theory believe that Shago is the city of Chicago, and they believe that this abandoned city, when it was found, was named Shago. That we came in, we found these architectural structures and moved on in, only later erasing them. How did we erase them? Well, suspiciously enough, shortly after the World Expo in 1893, a fire broke out in Chicago and burnt down the whole city, basically. All the structures and the statues and all the evidence of this sophisticated culture that once lived here. Again, you might ask yourself, fires happen. Couldn't this accidental fire have destroyed this whole city? Is that believable? It might be. Except for, in that same time period, they had world fairs across the planet. And every city that they had them in had architecture to rival this Chicago architecture that we're seeing in these photos. Every one of the cities that they had the World Expo in, after the expo was over, was demolished. Brick by brick. Our historians and government claim that these cities were just temporary constructions, created only for the World Expos. But it doesn't take a genius to look at this architecture and see the sturdiness, see the work, to know that this is not something that was erected in a year, like we're told in some instances, because that's the claim. Do you believe that a city like this would be constructed in a year at that time? And then after all the construction, they decided just to tear it down? It seems rather suspicious. And when you look at this architecture and you compare it to all the other cities that had the expos, who were later demolished, it's all very similar. And we find architecture like this all over the world. So believers in the Tartaria theory have a good point. They make some sense when they believe that perhaps there was a civilization, possibly more advanced than ours, that was wiped out by a natural disaster or on purpose. Either way, by a cataclysm of some type. Why would they lie to us? Why wouldn't they tell us about these beings that lived here? Oh, I think it's pretty obvious. Control. Our leaders around the world have a constant obsession with controlling their own populations. They might not like the idea of everyone knowing about a civilization more advanced than us. Perhaps with better healing technologies. Perhaps with stronger weapons. Maybe we might not want our world leaders to be in charge of us if we saw what this other civilization had accomplished. Some theorists believe that what wiped out this Tartarian civilization was a global flood, a giant mud flood. The reason they believe this is that all over the world there are examples of Tartarian-style architecture that's been buried. Many buildings in various cities across the planet, especially North America, places like Portland, you can find examples of buildings that seem to have their original first floor many meters down below the surface. Almost like they've been adjusted and have had doors added to the upper levels, but at some point the buildings were much taller and buried by a giant mud flood. This is a bit of a tangent, and we will cover it in a future video, but you can find these examples all over the world. And what again exactly is Tartaria? Tartaria is the name of a pre-Mongolian empire that originated in northern Asia before spanning the entire northern hemisphere. Great Tartaria was the largest empire during its time and would have still been the largest empire today. The Tartarian Empire flourished due to in part by the civilization being a leader in advanced technology, free energy, and grand architecture. Tartaria is also where the Greek word Tartarus originated from. The denotation of lost souls spending eternity in Tartarus, the underworld, is due to the Tartarian Empire having been buried and wiped out during the mud flood. The world of the Tartarians is literally the world under our world, the underworld. Tartarus wasn't the underworld and will never be the underworld. Tartaria is the underworld. The religionists used the mud flood deluge and how it wiped out the Tartarian Empire to confuse the populace into thinking that they would join those in the underworld if they challenged the religious authority. And this history slowly became legend, religion. Who were the Tartarians? The Tartarians, or Tartars, were the indigenous people making up the world-renowned Tartarian Empire. The Tartarians were a tall people, averaging some 8 to 12 feet in height. They would have been considered giants to our current average height of only around 6 feet. However, back then the height of 10 feet was the average. Like the civilizations before them whose heights averaged 12 feet or more. Each preceding civilization had an average height taller than the civilization coming after them, and each succeeding civilization had an average height shorter than the civilizations predating them. So it seems like previous civilizations were much taller, and every time we are theoretically wiped out by a disaster, we come back smaller. Civilizations in the current astrological age, the age of Pisces, are shorter in height than civilizations that existed in the previous astrological ages, such as Aries. And perhaps, after the next time we're wiped out, we will come back even smaller. Some believe the Tartarians had a more direct relationship with the ether. You could think of the ether almost like the Force on Star Wars. Some believe this civilization had technology that would harness energy from the ether, and they had a stronger spiritual connection to it, able to control it, which would have affected every way of life for the Tartarians. Even their digestive systems had adapted to gaining energy from the environment around them. The Tartarians were masters of masonry, brickwork, and steampunk-style technology. They're believed to have had universally free energy and grand architecture. Their Roman Gothic-esque style can still be found in the current guise as water ducts, city halls, banks, water stations, cathedrals, churches, hospitals, and similar public and city works type buildings. These are some of the few buildings that people believe were left behind during the demolition of the Tartarian civilization. Thinking more about how their civilization might have looked or behaved, and their technology, would more explain why our current governments and world leaders would want to cover this up. Imagine a world where energy is free, where you have the ability to make amazing structures very easily, where the population is healthy, balanced, happy, a utopia without war, and where we're less consumed by our destructive nature. It does make sense that either people or entities in charge of humanity now would want to forget about this civilization, erase it, so that we as a civilization would never come to realize our potential, how good we could have it, and instead it would make us more easy to control, to dominate, to not realize our full potential. What do you think, guys? Are these conspiracy theorists who believe in Tartaria wrong? Or does their argument make enough sense to be believable? I myself could go either way on it. I do believe, though, that much of our history is a lie, propaganda, and once you believe that, it leaves a giant empty gap behind us that I would love to one day fill in. Thank you for watching Murder, Monsters, and Mysteries. If you enjoyed today's video, please like and subscribe, as we'll be uploading more regularly.